What happens when someone makes a Faustian bargain for their soul for eternal youth? We'll find out with the portrait of Dorian Gray, or the picture of Dorian Gray, however you like to say it. Welcome to What Are You Reading, a podcast of the Public Library of Mount Vernon, Knox County. I'm Christy.
And I'm Katie.
And today we're going to be discussing our Color Our World 2025 Summer Reading Program pick, The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde. Mm-hmm. And this one is really interesting. So we were looking for titles that we thought would be fun as like a play on the theme for this year. Mm-hmm. So I was kind of going down the list like, oh, what about A Clockwork Orange? I was like, we've talked about that one. It's amazing. But we have had a book discussion on that one. Trying to think of The Color Purple or things like that. And our assistant director, she actually said, one of my favorite books is The Picture of Dorian Gray. Mm-hmm. And I thought, you know what, we do talk about classics. Mm-hmm. You guys know we've talked about some of them on the podcast, but it's been a while. Mm-hmm. And this was written in 1890 and then later published as a whole story in 1891. So we are going back a little bit. Mm-hmm. And it is definitely something that was controversial at the time.
Yes.
So we thought, why not see what all the fuss was about? Mm-hmm. And what caused Oscar Wilde to be put on trial in 1895 that lies inside of this. Mm-hmm. So as you can see, I've got notes. If you're listening to us at home, my book is full of bookmarks and highlighted spaces because there were just so many things that popped out to me about this book.
Yeah, same.
Yeah. I wanted to kind of go over a little bit of what you can expect. So we are going to be giving away copies of these. So if you're watching us or listening to us today on June 30th, we're actually giving away copies of The Picture of Dorian Gray here at the Mount Vernon branch of the Public Library. So stop in, grab one of these. These copies are super cool because they also include introduction and other writings of Oscar Wilde. Mm-hmm. So you get a really nice little collection here in this paperback.
Yes, and it's the unabridged version of the novel.
Which is super important because in 1890, it was the short story version was published in American periodical Lippincott's monthly magazine. Mm-hmm. And then it was later published as a full-length novel version. But a lot of the copies you'll find are abridged, that kind of thing. So this, you get the full story, which is great. And you can see what Oscar was trying to do with this story. Mm-hmm. So give you guys just a little bit of idea of what happens. We meet Dorian Gray, who is enthralled by his own exquisite portrait, right? This is a very attractive young person who is surrounded by people that admire his beauty. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that kind of leads him down a really dark path.
Yeah, especially from there's a character called Lord Henry, and he spends so much time telling Dorian, it's so great that you're beautiful. Mm-hmm. This is as good as it gets. As soon as you get your first crow's foot, you're gonna be ugly and boring. So hang on to the beauty as long as you can.
And you can imagine the psyche of any young person. I mean, we grew up in a time, I think all of us grew up in a time where, looks have always been important in our society. So it's all about beauty. It's all about wealth. It's all about what those things can buy you, but at what cost? Mm-hmm. It's like the meme, at what cost? Mm-hmm. And it, from Oscar's point of view, the cost is your soul. It is extremely high, the highest possible thing it could be.
Yes.
So Dorian makes a Faustian bargain to sell his soul in exchange for eternal youth and beauty under the influence of Lord Henry. Mm-hmm. He is drawn into this corrupt double life where he's doing these atrocious sins But because of his beauty and his wealth, he's still welcome in society. And even at the reactions of the women around him that he is abusing, the friendships that he is abusing, when he walks in a room, there's, say, some turning away from him, but yet he's still accepted.
Yes.
So there's a lot that you can break down here. This definitely talks a lot about what was expected of polite society in the 1800s, that honestly transcends to today.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
One thing our boss told us about was in regards to this book was at this particular time, it's like, well, if it looks good, it must be good.
Yeah.
And Oscar Wilde turns it completely on its head.
Absolutely.
And even Dorian gets enthralled by it because it's like, ooh, I wonder what would happen to the picture if I did this.
Yes.
Or if I did that.
Absolutely.
And then looking at himself in the mirror and being like, haha.
Yeah. So imagine that premise, right? Of you've made a deal to trap all of your sins into a portrait of yourself. And every time you do something despicable, something happens to your appearance in that photo, but you have eternal youth. And I could see where it would become, like, I mean, you've been alive for so long, it becomes a game of like, how atrocious can I be, and what exactly is going to happen to is my ear going to fall off, and you know, like, how aged am I going to appear from, how much does this one sin equal in years of aging my portrait? You know, there's so many ways you can go with that, and this book is honestly described as Gothic horror. And I think that a lot of times in today's current society, we think horror, we think of, you know, maybe the blood and guts and that kind of thing. But at this time, this was definitely a horror novel, and dealing with the idea of, you know, selling your soul to the devil, the horrific aging, the horrific sicknesses that were around at that time that could affect you. So there are a lot of horror elements in this, and the Gothic writings. As we know, Oscar Wilde was a part of that group. You know, we get Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. We get so much out of that group of writers of that time period that maintains today as some of our horror classics.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and I have sold this one short. You know, because I was so enraptured by Mary Shelley's Frankenstein that often I would overlook the picture of Dorian Gray. And it is pretty short. So this is something anybody could pick up and read. There is a wonderful introduction in here that I actually did highlight, something that I did want to read out to you guys. And this introduction is by Richard Ellman. And it says, several parts really struck me, but it is Wilde's version of the Faust legend, the bartering of a soul for eternal youth and gratification. And one of the female characters, Sybil Vane, it has its Gretchen, and the Lord Henry Wanton is Mephistopheles. So if you are familiar with that legend at all, which is definitely something that comes up quite often in our media, I think, we see these characters that make these deals, and we have to kind of come to terms with what we would be willing to do too. You know, looking at yourself in the mirror and saying, what would I be willing to do to keep this like nice face that I had at 20? Or would I be strong enough to say no? I don't know. I think so. I think so. Something else that stuck out to me was, to be a bad actress is to be a good person, just as cliches are better than epigrams. Contrawise, to be a good pretender like Dorian or Lord Henry is to be a bad man. And like we were saying, there's so many things in here that you can really pull apart, and that is definitely one of them. We see Dorian pretending, Lord Henry pretending in the light of day to be these upstanding people. But what they do in their private life, which can be very much the opposite of the ideals that they're holding up in the daylight. So you have to kind of tackle all of that in here too.
Oh yeah, there for such a short novel, there is a lot to unpack. I think it'd be great for a book club.
Yeah, definitely.
Because there are so many different ways you can read it.